Hi, everyone. Sorry, I was in with a bunch of people and no one came and got me, so I didn't look at my watch and I apologize. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I hope everyone is having an amazing Tuesday. Do we have all the translators on?
We are good to go, Dr. Ram.
Hi, Patrick. It's good to
Uh,
see you.
it's great to see.
Um, all right. So let me read the medical disclaimer. I'll have to pull myself together. It's been one of those days. I'm trying to get a lot of stuff done. I hope everyone's having a good summer. And today we're going to talk about some issues. We're not making claims or about some topics. We're not going to make claims. This is for educational purposes only. So if you guys share this, I want to make sure you know that it's not intended for medical advice or substitute for medical advice, that this should be information that's really helping people understand different ingredients and what's going on in their life without making a claim that any of the products that I've worked on or anything we have cures or fixes a problem or diagnoses a problem. I do want to make sure you guys understand that you should always consult with a doctor or other healthcare professional for medical advice or diagnosis and treatment. And also, again, that we don't claim to diagnose, mitigate, prevent, or cure diseases. So let's go into the slides. All right, so I had a request from Marina on autism spectrum disorder. So I wanted to make sure that we talked about this today. And many of you guys know this is a topic that I'm very sensitive about because as a psychologist and in different things that I've done throughout my career, I've worked a lot with autism. So let's dig right down into what's going on and how possibly natural things can help support the body. I say this all the time. It doesn't matter what your diagnosis is. What's important is that you're able to be the best person you can be. And autism, like everything else in life, is just a characteristic or something that some people have to deal with. It doesn't mean they're less than someone else or they're more important than someone else. It just means it's a difference. But it becomes very hard when you have a child or a significant other that's somewhere on the spectrum and you can't communicate. And that's why, can you not hear me, Patrick?
I can hear you fine. I'm responding.
Okay, thank you. The volume's fine because Patrick's not even in the office and he can hear me. So if you guys are having problems with the volume, I think it's on your end. I love you, Patrick. I
I'm,
see
I'm
you
at
like
the, I'm at the zoo. I'm at the zoo today.
he's at the zoo. He's at the zoo. Hey, you and Ted and Clayton are not in the office. That's what I know. And today has been one of those days. um, anyway, going into this, I just want to say this. As a psychologist, I worked with various areas of autism. I also have had a lot of friends and family and different people that have had this diagnosis or had to deal with it. And there's all kinds of things that surround that. And that's why I'm glad Verena wanted to talk about this because it is important to understand that this spectrum is different for everyone. It's like if you have a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis or if you have a diagnosis of lupus, it presents in a different way. But I think autism has even more of a spectrum because there's so many different levels of it and different types. And at first, when I was younger, and then when I got into college, we just called it autism. Then you started hearing words like OCD or anxiety or ADHD or ODD, ADD, all the things that kind of surrounded it. And I want to make sure you guys understand just because you have depression doesn't mean you have autism. Just because you have OCD doesn't mean you have autism or ADHD, but sometimes you can have ADHD and it is a part of autism. Sometimes you can have OCD and it's a part of autism. I think I've told you guys when I was little, my parents used to say I was special, and I didn't like that word. I was like, what is special? And I just wanted to be like everyone else. And then I got older and I started understanding it meant that I could do some things really, really well and some things I couldn't do well at all. And I'm bringing that up because, again, every single individual in this life, if you look at a diagnosis, we all have something, right? But I think our goal in life is to be the best version of ourselves and to communicate in the best way possible. And looking at all the risk factors and all the causes and being able to really identify autism at an early age is really important because then you can really help people with any obstacle that they think is preventing them from being the best they can be or achieving what they want to achieve in life. I also want to add this: people that have autism are sometimes able to achieve things that other people can't because they have a way of a sensory system or diagnosis system or pathway system where they see things differently. And again, this is a whole spectrum of things. And I'm speaking as a scientist, I'm also speaking as a psychologist today. It's really important that people understand this. But children that have certain types of autism have a lot of struggles. And so do adults that have certain types of autism because they can't communicate all the time the way the rest of the world is communicating. They see things differently. I look at this as something that is basically an overstimulation of what's going on, and the brain can't figure out how to identify it and how to handle it all at the same time. A lot of times people with autism, they basically hear certain sights or sounds, or if they touch something and it really bothers them. I'll give you an example. I'm probably on somewhere on the spectrum. For example, if I see round circles all over things, it really bothers me. I don't like to touch things that have certain textures. And a lot of times people that have either Asperger's or autism or anxiety or different things along the spectrum, they're the same way. So I would say all of us have something we can identify with it here. However, there are some individuals, again, that really struggle from this because it changes the way they deal with life and how they can handle things. And I don't want to minimize autism, but I also want to empower people and their families if they have different forms of this spectrum disorder. Consequently, I want to add this. Some people that have autism feel enslaved and they feel like they have this inability to work with their peers, and it really they feel unique, they feel special, but they also feel odd, and they feel anxious, and they feel embarrassed. So hopefully we can help people through the root community to understand, regardless of your diagnosis, regardless if you have any ADHD or ODD or OCD, or if you're gifted, no matter what you are on the spectrum, you should always feel empowered by this community, because all it means is you just have different things to work through in life that can make you not just special, but can make you actually achieve things that other people can't. So I want us to really put our arms around this. I don't want us to look at autism as something that inhibits us from being the best version of ourselves. Let's go on to the next slide. So again, I'm really trying to talk about this disorder because I think, again, years ago when you said the word autistic, you thought of someone that couldn't speak, or you thought of someone that couldn't communicate at all, or that didn't get along with other people. Now we know there's this spectrum. So let's talk about that. If you look at the spectrum, it's considered a neurodevelopment disorder, and it's characterized by basically social interaction and how you develop, how you can communicate with people and how you behave, your interests, your activities. A lot of times this appears at childhood, but the parents don't know what's going on. Sometimes it's masked during childhood. And what I mean by that, there are people with certain levels of the spectrum, like an idiot savant, for example, who is an extremely intelligent person. Some of those people, 99% of those people, 99.9% of those people actually are not able to communicate. They don't have social skills. You don't see them out a lot because those are the people like Rain Man that are counting their fingers or have an answer to a math problem or a science problem. But a lot of those people can't socially really interact. However, there's a small percent of those people that are able to socially interact, and they do get along in social situations. So they mask it, and other people don't know that they have this disorder. And I want to bring this up because you guys may end up looking into your own life and think, gosh, there's certain things here that I identify with. And all that means is maybe you are somewhere on the spectrum, but that's okay. I would like for people to look at it as we are each individual people. So again, this is just something that we have to live with if we have this disorder, or if you have this disorder, and then you want to become the best you can be regardless of the disorder. I don't look at this disorder as something horrible. I look at it as something that we can unlock and really help people with throughout our lives as we build relationships. Let's talk again about the explanation of the spectrum concept, because I understand why Verena wanted to look into this. There's lots of variabilities. There's no two individuals with autism that are the same. And I want to make sure that everyone understands that. And that's why support and intervention are different for each person. This goes back to naturally using certain products to help people too. I want you guys to know every person along the spectrum will need different things to help their bodies really unlock the communication skills and the social skills, the sensory skills, so that they can adapt better and feel better about their own lives. So let's talk about the prevalence of this. So every country is different. I want to point this out. It was believed at one point, and it still is in some countries, that 1 out of 7 boys could be born with autism due to heavy metals, due to pollution, due to different factors that are occurring in our world. However, overall, the CDC says right now 1 in 36 children are diagnosed with this. Again, in some countries, like Saudi Arabia, for example, those numbers are a lot higher. And the CDC produces this number, but if you ask some psychologists and some doctors, like me, I would say that it is much higher than this. However, this is the number that the CDC basically reports. The gender is 4 times more common in boys than girls, which is why you see a lot more boys with autism. And I would argue that some of that has to do with the hippocampus. You know, a male part of the brain of the hippocampus does not develop until they're in their 20s. And sometimes in their late 20s, whereas the females develops in their teens. And so boys take a lot longer to grow up than girls. And I think that's part of the reason why there's more of a variable. I also think that the male brain and hormones, when it comes to heavy metals, unlocks things differently or locks things differently when it comes to an epigenetic. So again, boys are much more common than girls to have this. It affects all races, socioeconomic groups. The diagnosis is really dependent on the doctor. So you could take someone with autism to 7 doctors and they would all have a different answer of what they believed was the diagnosis. So I don't want you guys to hold on to the diagnosis. And what I mean by that is if I would have held on to every diagnosis I had throughout my life, I wouldn't be sitting here today. I wouldn't be traveling to other countries. I would simply be scared to death that I was never going to have a good life or a normal life. You have to make sure that if you're diagnosed with autism or someone in your life is diagnosed, that they understand that they have every opportunity in life to achieve whatever they want. And as a community, we need to support them and help them do that. We can't make claims that our products are doing it, but as a community, we can move forward educationally and through compassion and make sure we're dealing with every individual with love and kindness and empathy, and that we're relating to all of this. I do want to say this. I want people to understand if you have a close relative or if you have a person that you're dealing with autism, you may have to adapt the way you're communicating. You may have to give leniencies. A lot of people with autism are extremely OCD, like I said earlier. So they get fixated on everything being perfect. And of course, life isn't perfect. So you have to give them the grace to understand that they are important too and try to acknowledge their feelings. When you don't acknowledge the feelings of an autistic person, it creates a lot of harm. So let me use an example. If you're doing this and I'm knocking in front of an autistic person that has severe autism, that's going to drive them crazy. You're going to see them beating their head against the wall. You're going to see them rocking back and forth because they can't handle that noise. Now, if you ask me on a spectrum of 1 to 10, how much I can handle that noise, I'm at a 4 to 5. I don't like that. I don't like that constant noise. So I have learned to adapt and tune things out so that I can productively work. And that's called a coping mechanism. So I'm getting a little bit more into this than I thought that I would because I've dealt with so many kids with autism. You need to take your child or your relative or the person you know, if they have autism, you need to, again, have compassion and try to develop coping mechanisms for them. So if you have a person, for example, in your life that has autism, You want to teach them different coping skills. If you ask me, what do I do when I hear this? I immediately start meditating and breathing and calming down in my mind and talking slower and talking softer, because that helps me calm down. The same applies to a person with autism. You want to start talking very calmly. You want to be very patient, and you want to teach them that it's okay. That noise is there, but let's deal with it. And you can do that by teaching them to really breathe in and out and meditate, and by being very calm. So another technique I used to use with children I dealt with autism is I would gently touch their hands. When they would start rocking back and forth and beating their heads against the wall, I would look them in the eye. And a lot of times they won't look you in the eye because they're so irritated. So I would gently touch them on the hand and show calmness, kindness, and peace. And those are characteristics that you can really help children or people with autism, because that will help calm them down. The assurance and the kindness and the acceptance of that person will cause them to thrive and succeed. Children with autism do not do well, and adults with autism do not do well with constant criticism, because here's a fact: people with autism are very sensitive. So you have to understand, even though they may act aggravating or mean, or they may bite, or they may hit, it's because they're extremely frustrated, because they're extremely sensitive to everything going on around them. And I think that will help you deal with people with autism, because then you can understand, wait a minute, even though this person is being loud, even this person is being angry or biting, they're really just sensitive. And you can start talking slower and start talking calmer, and you can help them find some peace, because I think that's one of the things that they really crave and that's really needed. And that's one of the techniques that I've always used. Another thing you can use with autism is really being able to put structure around things. Let's go on to the next slide. So I remember being in class and we were studying what people's brains looked like when they had autism or schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. And I was always fascinated with it, because it was all these different colors. And I always looked at it personally like music, like all these different things that I'm looking at. And I found beauty in it, because everyone's brain is so different. And again, there's a spectrum. Whatever mental health disorder you're diagnosed with, whether it's depression, anxiety, OCD, whether you have extreme anger disorders, which is another area, or autism, it's your brain mapping that's doing things differently. So you've got to create basically an ability to calm the brain down so that it can handle the surroundings that you're around. Structure, order, calmness, and kindness work. Children do not do well in a school setting when they have a teacher that's constantly getting onto them, or they have kids that are constantly picking on them. And they're usually the kids that end up in the principal's office, or they get in trouble. And if you really dial that back and look into it, it's because, again, they need acceptance, they need kindness, they need you to be gentle, and they need you to really understand that they matter. And that's something I really want to get across to this community, because autism is becoming more and more prevalent. And I want this community to be extremely understanding of that and extremely accepting of that fact, so that we can help more and more people. Let's talk about the brain size and growth patterns. Some studies suggest that children with autism have larger brains overall. However, I can tell you guys, I've seen other studies that show the opposite. The difference in size could be due to abnormal patterns of brain growth and development. Again, I've seen both studies, and they kind of balance each other out. So I don't actually think this is a thing, but it is something that some of the research shows. Neuronal connectivity is basically looking at different regions of the brain and how they can be altered with individuals with autism. This can basically cause patterns and processes to work differently, which is why people with autism process things differently. And then the gray matter and the white matter, it's basically the difference in distribution and the volume of gray matter. So you really got to look at the cognitive functioning and look at language, social interaction, and again, sensory processing. I want to say this though: people with autism have just as good of a memory or better than we do. or than you do if you don't have autism. It means they can remember things that maybe we can't because their brain is focused on a different area. If you look at the mapping on the screen, you see how the red is basically it's smaller with the child with autism. They're not getting really as much of an understanding in certain areas. But if you look at this in a different way, like as a psychologist and a scientist, when I look at this gives a person with autism a different way to look at things that perhaps are better in some areas. Certain areas of the brain, they do look at, if you look at the AMELDA and you look at different areas, I can tell you that the emotional processing is different. That is absolutely true. And almost all individuals with autism, the emotional part is different. And sometimes that means they don't act emotional at all. Sometimes they're overly emotional, but it's a different pattern. And the decision-making process and the social behavior is different. So for example, people with Asperger's and autism, they don't really sometimes recognize when they say something inappropriate or they say something mean. They're not trying to be mean. They're stating a fact of what they believe at that moment. And a lot of times people with autism believe that so strongly that you can't convince them in any way that they're wrong. And they don't recognize that they just said something socially inappropriate to others because in their minds, they just said whatever popped up in their mind. So you have to be understanding of this fact. Go on to the next slide. So we've talked a little bit about the signs and symptoms of autism. A lot of times it comes out between the age of 2 and 3. There's a lot of people, depending on what side of the fence you're on, that think that it has to do with vaccines. I think, and I've said this before, I don't blame vaccines on everything, but I do think the heavy metals and the carriers of our vaccines are harmful to some individuals. I have to be careful what I say because of what we do for a living. Patrick knows very well how I think. So does Ted. So does Clayton. I think it's a triggering event. And what I mean by that is I do think there's individuals that have had vaccines that have a reaction that cause the brain to develop differently and cause vaccine injuries. I also think if you ask me, could it have happened without a vaccine? Yes, we have data, we have information that shows there are plenty of children that have never been vaccinated that have autism, right? So if you look at this, I do think vaccines can cause injuries. However, I do also think that there are children with autism, again, that have never been vaccinated, and it's just a triggering event. However, as a scientist, I'm going to go back to this. I do think it's an environmental factor that triggers a lot of this. I think there's pollution. I think there's heavy metals. I think there's all kinds of viruses and bacteria that go into the system. And sometimes it can happen baby is while the baby is developing in the mother's stomach, and we're passing this on from generation to generation, which is why we have to get rid of heavy metals in our system, and which is why we have to be selective of how or if we vaccinate our children or ourselves. We want to think about the process, not that we think autism is a horrible thing, but autism can be the roadblock and can cause more of an issue in you being able to do what you want to do with your life. Doesn't mean that you're not going to do it. It just means that this can be something that we need to focus on, and it matters. It really matters. And that's why, in my opinion, the subjects of vaccines matter because people matter. And when people ask me, I have people get very upset with me because they want me on one side or the other. And I say this all the time. I'm on the side of humans. I want humans to have the best life possible. I want us to support other people. I want us to understand. And I believe in personal choice. Repetitive behavior is one of the areas that I've really noticed with autism. And I want to talk about this. It's not all on the screen, but people that have autism, you'll see them rocking a lot. This calms them down. Another thing you'll see is this. They will, and you have to pay attention to it, but they'll do this, and that's calming them down. Because now Tourette's does this as well. But if you do this, which is why I said sometimes I'll touch their hand, that will cause them, they'll do it on their own to cause basically self-calming. And that's a technique. That's actually a good technique. Now, hitting the head against the wall, you got to try to correct that because that can interfere with their life when they're in social situations. So you want to try to get rid of the hitting on the wall or the biting or the anger and substitute it for very calm things, right? Very soft things, very gentle and loving things. And that will really help children or adults with autism. I know a few adults with Asperger's and autism, because Asperger's is a form of autism. And I've had some very close relationships with people, and that's what I do to calm those individuals down. Is I'm just very gentle and I'm very calm and I lower my voice. So I want to say that again because I really want this community, because this is going to become more and more prevalent in our world, and I want us to be able to communicate appropriately. The challenge is developing and maintaining relationships. A lot of people can't handle dealing with someone with Asperger's or autism. They don't understand the outburst. They don't understand these individuals saying things that are socially not acceptable. They don't understand how they like have verbal and nonverbal cues. It's very different. But if you look at some of the top CEOs in this world and some of the top leaders and most eccentric, wealthy people in this world, they have characteristics of autism. And I would say that some of those characteristics have helped them get to where they are because they're able to somehow focus on certain areas and achieve success, even though maybe the rest of the world wouldn't have predicted that about them when they were younger. So ritualistic behavior, basically, I want to focus on this. People with autism react very stressed. They have distress at even small changes in a routine. They really like routine. One of the reasons they have repetitive movements, just so you guys know, like the rocking or the spinning or the flapping, is because that's at least something they can do. That's a ritual. That's the same thing over and over, and that calms them down. And that's why if you guys have children or people that are doing this or doing this or jumping up and down, you want to teach them another technique. And you do that by just calmly showing them another ritual that will help them calm down. And that's one of the behaviors as a psychologist that I used to use. They have highly focused interest. So a lot of people with autism are extremely smart in like areas like math or science. Some of them, because they're individuals, right? So everyone's different. Some of them have extreme interest in music or art. And a lot of times they're really good and better than anyone else in the world at those areas because they stay so focused on that. So you can see the benefit that can happen with this diagnosis. I always like to look at the pros and the cons so then you can deal with things effectively and decide who you want to be as a person and how you can help those people around you that have it. I think, again, that the statistics around autism, so if any of you guys have children, I'm just going to let you know, I think that spectrum is huge. And I think this hopefully, I hopefully this will bring you some understanding into your own children and into your own lives and the people around you, and understanding that maybe you don't understand why your child or why people are reacting a certain way. And sometimes, again, it has to do with that spectrum. And so you've got to adapt your behavior too to try to help them to be able to really respond and feel good in an environment. Again, I talked about the sensitivity to sound and smells. You can sometimes see there's certain people with autism that like the smell of broccoli, they just can't handle it and they'll walk out. A lot of times parents that have children with autism that have not been diagnosed, they don't understand why their kids will only eat chicken or they'll only eat French fries and they won't eat anything else. And again, this goes back to the ritual. It also goes back to the texture. So you can't really get mad at your kids if that's an issue. You got to adapt the behavior and try to relate and try to handle it the right way. Diagnosis and interventions are hard. I'm just going to tell you guys because I've dealt with, during COVID, I was dealing with some people of high influence in Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. It's more common, like I said earlier, especially with boys with autism in those areas. And it was extremely frustrating to the family because families that I was dealing with, because they were of high influence and they were going to so many doctors and so many clinics and they didn't have good results. And for me, it's really simple. And I know that people are probably listening to this that had experience with autism and saying Christina's oversimplifying it, but I'm not. It goes back to figuring out that person and figuring out what they need and what their triggers are, and then helping them create mechanisms and create patterns and create ways where they can handle that when they become an adult. If they are an adult and they have autism, then you can work with them as a friend or a coworker at trying to help them understand how to relate to the rest of the world as well. Let's go on to the next slide. So variability, again, this is why I think there's such a confusion about autism. There's high functioning and there's also low functioning, and there is an extreme difference. And I want to make sure I point this out. Some people that are high functioning have above average intelligence. Some of them are brilliant. That's what an idiot savant is. Basically, they're very, very smart. They excel though in specific areas. So anytime you see an individual like this, what a lot of times you don't see is the weakness. Like a lot of times people that have the extreme high functioning Asperger's or high functioning autism, they don't pronounce things right, or they can't find directions, or they can't tell time. There's always this weakness. So again, you're adapting. And I would say, in my opinion, it's brilliant that there's these strengths and these weaknesses, and we've got to work together so that we all use our strengths and weaknesses to be the best that we can be. It is very challenging. I want to say this to any parent that has a child with autism, or a partner with autism, or a best friend with autism. It's a challenge because you have to constantly communicate and you have to figure it out. Personally, from my opinion, I'm just going to tell you guys, I like trying to figure things out. I like trying to figure out, how do I solve a problem? How can I help people? And I think that's really important for you guys to remember. For every strength, again, there's a weakness and there's a challenge and there's things that you have to work on, but you just have to use patience. You have to use understanding. And one of the things that I always did when I worked with children with autism, and I would sit in silence and try to figure out, okay, how do I break this so I can get through to them, so I can have a relationship? And that's something you can do. It just takes time, and it takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of dedication. And we're going to get to this later. Nutrition is a huge factor in that, which is why I think that we have a lot to offer in our company, because nutrition is a huge trigger to people that have autism. And it's something where you can really create a change and an adaptation, because a lot of the pharmaceutical products just simply have not worked in this area. Comorbid conditions, we talked about them earlier: ADHD, anxiety, OCD, sleep, GI issues, because they're so sensitive that they really have stomach issues. And I want to stop and I want to say this: people that have a lot of GI issues are usually more sensitive. It's because they care. It's because they worry. It's because things matter, right? So you really, again, have to teach these techniques to help calm down. And meditation, in my opinion, is huge for this. Spending time to really find yourself and find what your triggers are and how you can calm down is extremely important. And then if you have a version of autism, I just want to speak to you guys. Don't feel bad. Don't feel bad about yourself. Don't think that you're deficient. Don't think that you have a problem. Instead, look at this as a journey in your life where you're going to unlock things every day so you can become better and better. Let's go on to the next slide. Finding the right people to deal with autism, though, and I'm just going to say this, there's a lot of places throughout the United States and internationally. Some of those places cost a lot of money, but sometimes it's just the family or a friend helping you unlock it, because sometimes there's not a doctor, there's not a treatment that's going to help you. Instead, again, you go back to, how do we create coping mechanisms so that life becomes bearable, so that life becomes good, and then life becomes great. And that's going to be your goal. So let's talk about genetic factors. It often runs in families. Let me use an example. People that are high functioning Asperger's or autistic, idiot savants, different things like that, are usually, they're almost geniuses. They have a very, very high IQ. And this is something that's passed on. I have not seen as many, and I'm just being honest, people with autism with lower IQs where I feel like it's passed on as much, but the research shows that there is a genetic link. Certain genes and mutations are associated with this, we think. We also think the microbiome can be effective or can be associated with it, and of course, heavy metals and other factors. But Fragile X syndrome and Rett syndrome are two things that are definitely mutations that can impact this and can be a trigger and is associated with this. Again, your environmental factors: pollution, heavy metals, pesticides, toxins. And I think that's why when we first started Root, we had so many people come forward. We weren't making any claims about autism or Asperger's or anything, but people were feeling a difference. I don't know if Priscilla is on this call because, Patrick, I wanted Priscilla to be able to talk because she's had such great experiences. If Priscilla isn't, I would like for her to come on the next Root. If she is, if she could raise her hand, because I worked with Priscilla and with her family, and she's one of the most patient, understanding individuals I've ever met. And I feel that like she really was able to identify and adapt to different things so that she could really handle her situation and improve upon it. And I know that she thinks the Root products really helped her with that, but I think it was the overall process of Priscilla working so hard. By the way, guys, I'm going to interrupt a little bit. I'm getting a lot of direct messages, Patrick. And just so you know, it's really hard for me to read direct messages that are like paragraphs while I'm on this call. So if you guys are sending a direct message, if you can reach out to my email or reach out to Patrick to get it to me, I just don't want to, I don't want to miss this because I see a lot of messages to me today, and I want to respond, but I can't while I'm doing the talk. Let me go back to the slides. Another thing is a DSM-5 criteria. And I've told you guys before, as a psychologist, I always use a DSM-4. It's now the DSM-5. It diagnoses. Everyone on this phone call would have some kind of diagnosis in life. None of us are perfect. And you can always find a problem with all of us. And I want to point that out. I want everyone to understand this. Anyone that's judging someone with autism, you need to look at yourself in the mirror. Because again, none of us are perfect, and we need to continue to try to understand every single person in every single area. I do think early diagnosis is important, but I want to say this to everyone on the phone. I bet there's people on this phone call that have never been diagnosed with any kind of spectrum of autism, that have some kind of spectrum or some fragment of that, right? That your brain has unlocked things different. I bet if we looked at your pattern in your brain, you would see different blues, different reds, different yellows in all of us. So again, this goes back to really accepting and understanding everyone around you, not making a judgment, not getting angry, but being patient and loving. And I want to say this as a parent. If you have a child with autism, it's extremely hard. The patience is very, very hard. Let's go back to this. Most it's usually a boy, right? But sometimes it's a girl. There's a higher chance of a boy having autism, but sometimes, of course, there's females as well. You need to make sure that you're patient. And I want to say this as a mother. If you have a teacher that's being mean to your children and they have certain characteristics of that, it's your job as a parent to advocate for your child and to not listen to the negativity. I've taken my children out of classes. I put them in different environments in order to support them. And that's what everyone has to do. Every single child that you have, every relationship you have is so special that you need to advocate, you need to protect, and your job is to love that person and care enough. And I know I'm getting off science a lot today, but you have to love and care enough that you advocate. You take all the negativity out. You take everything out. If someone says to your child or your family member, you can't do this, you have autism, you're not smart, you have a problem in the class, you can't get along with your peers, all of that stuff. Your job as a parent, as a friend, as a person, is to advocate for that person and to help them find solutions to this. I was reading a study about athletic teams, so I want to speak to the athletes that are on this call. Do you know that there is a higher propensity of OCD and autism in athletes? It's because they're so focused on that one area that they become so great at it. So what is meant to be a criticism becomes a success story. And I want you guys to really listen to that, because I think that's very, very important to understand. And so a lot of people, when you watch athletes, they do the same thing repetitively, right? And they learn to be good at it. You watch people that are on a rugby field or a volleyball court or bowling, or let's go into any subject, they're really good, right? But they may have a spectrum of autism, and their teammates have to understand. They're probably one of the best players on the team, just so you guys know. But again, it's something that you can identify and really help. And then we're going to get into nutrition because that's why it's so important to focus on these areas. The standard tools and evaluations, in my opinion, are not great. I'm just going to be honest with you. Everyone has a different way of diagnosing. And again, if you went to 7 psychologists, they would all probably give you a different type of diagnosis. Multidisciplinary teams are better. However, those are so expensive. And I want to be really honest with people. It's important for you guys to know you can help people with autism and yourself if you have autism without having money. So let's talk about how we do that. Let's go to the next slide. Therapies and treatments. The applied behavioral analysis, I feel like is very good. I think you need to find someone that can work with your children, or you can work with your children to really, again, teach techniques and social skills and communication. If you're working with a child or a person with this, remember to remain calm. Remember not to be judgmental. I want to use an example. I was doing a group therapy session with some autistic kids. And one of the kids stood up and said, F-U-C-K, S-H-I-T. I'm not going to say the bad words. I mean, 25 bad words, like as loud as they could in the group session. I sat there as a psychologist and remained very calm. Everyone around us, because everyone had autism in the group, became very agitated. They didn't know what to do. After the outburst was over, I said, thank you for communicating that. Now let's talk about what's upsetting you and let's talk calmly. And I was able to use a series of singing and calmness and softness to get the anger to subside. If you ask me what caused the anger, I'm not exactly sure. My analysis at that point, what I thought as a psychologist, was that there was too much going on in the room and that person couldn't calm down. And those were angry words they were using. If you guys were on a Root U call and someone started doing that, you would probably think this person's horrible. Maybe that person is in sensory overload. Maybe they have emotional issues. You just need to remember there are those outbursts and you need to accept. Doesn't mean you need to say that's okay to do that. In fact, with that particular patient, I said, let's not talk like that anymore. And then he said it again to show me that he could say it again. But by the end of the session, I can say that the different therapy sessions we had after that, he was much better because I remained calm no matter what the situation, no matter what happened. Your speech therapy is very important because a lot of people, and I said this earlier, have problem with speech and pronunciations. And so you have to really work with that. A lot of times kids with autism need to be in speech, their 8th or 9th grade at least, because you need to work with them through that. That's another thing you can identify symptoms of autism is speech patterns. Occupational therapy, this helps with motor skills. A lot of times people with autism are extremely uncoordinated. However, if they start doing sports and you start working with them, they can really be focused on that and become, like I said earlier, an excellent athlete. Social skills training is very, very important. And I think that leans heavily on the people closer around the people with autism, because even if you put a person in autism in counseling every week, you're still going to have the people around them really support them and teach them and help them learn how to socially interact, because in their brains, what they're saying is okay. So you have to repetitively say, you can't say that. The next day, they may do the same thing. And you have to say, you can't say that. If a person has Asperger's or autism, they're usually going to say, I know. And then you're going to say, then can we figure out a way so you don't keep doing that? And then one of the things you guys can do if you're dealing with someone with Asperger's or autism is to figure out a trigger word or a keyword. And what that means is if you have a close relationship with them, you use the word. They have to agree to stop their behavior or their outburst if you use that word. And you're going to have to continuously go back to that habit, but you'll eventually help teach them that trigger word means stop acting that way, because they don't know that in their brain. So you have to help them understand it. Let's talk about the supplements though, because I think that's why you guys also want to be here and discuss it. I know that, let's go to the next slide and the next slide. Why have the Root products helped people? And again, I'm very careful about this because we can't claim to cure autism or Lyme's disease or anything else. And I always say this, our goal is to make people as great as they can be and as beautiful as they can be. Clean slate is definitely a fundamental product that has been used with a lot of different people that they feel like supports them in their ability to communicate and to interact better if they have Asperger's or autism or anywhere on the spectrum. We know that the Trinity, for example, with OCD, with ADHD, with ADD, with anxiety and depression, we've been able to assist people to be as great as they can be and to feel better. And for me, here's what matters. I don't care if someone has Asperger's or autism or any kind of disorder. I care that they feel good about their life, that they can communicate with their family, that they're able to really understand. So the Trinity protocol for me has been amazing because that protocol has been able to really impact people that have called me on the phone, that have emailed us, that have sent in case studies on how they're able to handle life better because of these products. And I think some of it has to do, obviously, with the fact that this product, Clean Slate, is targeted at really trying to remove the heavy metals in the body, as well as any kind of environmental factor that is destructive with the body. The goal is to go into the body and be able to communicate that. Now, people have said to me repetitively lately, well, we've heard about this nano emulsion or this nano product that's a zeolite. I just want to say this to you guys, and I've said it before, I want to say it again. This particular product has patents and patent pending technology and trade secrets around it. The product was, the silica was taken out so that it could help at the same time support the body and becoming a basically remediation and not just a detoxification. And I think that's one of the keys of why this has been able to help people to become as great as they can be. Being able to basically support the body and the enzyme and pathways and hormone protection through the trace minerals and the way it's delivered and the vitamins and the way that they relate to the body and the well-being has been significant, I think, for cognitive functioning and behavioral regulation, which are so important with anyone on that spectrum. And I think that's why there's been such great results. And we've had so many people listen, guys, and that's why I wish Priscilla was on here. We've had people that weren't talking and weren't communicating, and they were on the Trinity and they're living their best life ever. And again, I relate that back to not just the products, but to the overall system. And I want to say this to everyone. This goes back to emotionally, mentally, physically, psychologically, really supporting every individual in their life. The products are a piece of that. The rest of the piece is also the understanding and the environment that you're building around them. But if you ask me, what is the dosing that most people that have anywhere on the spectrum, what do they take with Clean Slate? Some of them have to start slower. I just want you guys to know, with like 1 drop in the morning and 1 drop at night. Most of them go up, if they're younger, to 5 drops in the morning and 5 drops at night with lots of water, lots of green tea. The nutritional components around them are very important as well. Some people go up to 30 drops, 10 drops in the morning, 10 at lunch, and 10 at night. And I'm saying that because every single person is important. The bioavailable silica that comes from the process that I formulated of this product, I think is very important. And the reason I think this is because you have to really support the cognitive functioning in these environments. So being able to go in with a silica instead of just a zeolite that detoxes, you've really got a 1, 2, 3 punch, because you have a formulation that has taken the silica that can help with that whole process with the cognitive function in the brain, heart, and the GI, as well as the remediation process, which is supporting the dynamic in the body, where you support the brilliance of the body to really self-heal. And I think that's why it's so important. It influences the mood. And like if you look at vitamin C alone, and I'm sorry, I'm going back to this, and the immune function and the trace minerals and the silica, and it really should say this under all 3 of them, you're really supporting the neurotransmitters. You can't change something where there's a disturbance unless you're supporting the neurotransmitters, and you don't need to just detox it. You need to support that remediation where you're really supporting the healing in the body as well. Again, I'm not claiming that our products heal everyone, but inside your body, there's a city. And so what you've got to do is you've got to give your body the tools, and you've got to give everyone around you the tools so that they can be as great as they can be. They can communicate. They don't have anger. They don't have issues with emotions, or at least they're better, right? That's your goal. And that means making sure if you have a child, or making sure if someone is taking clean slate and they have any of this, that they're also drinking water. They're also drinking green teas or different things that will help them basically get rid of the toxins that are in their body while supporting the body again to remediate, which I shouldn't say the word heal, because we can't really say we're healing anything. But in my mind, being able to give the components to the body so it can naturally do this on its own through support is our goal. Let's go to the next slide. Restore is very, very important. And let me explain why. So your black cumin seed oil, as far as inflammation, and here's another thing that I didn't talk about earlier. When you look at Asperger's and autism in that spectrum, we have been able to see through research that the more stress, the more inflammation, the more aggravation around the body. It's not just sound. It's not just all the other stuff. It's actually inside the body. If there's inflammation, that becomes worse. So any of you guys that have children that go to school, or that you're at home and they start acting very angry, I bet you could look at their nutrition and what's happening around them and their sleep patterns and what they're drinking and what they're eating. And you're going to say, wait a minute, this is on me too. You know, as a parent, I remember looking at myself some days and thinking, this is on me. Like, they haven't slept, they haven't eaten the right food. What are we going to do to support it? Black cumin seed, in my opinion, is one of the strongest things, and I've worked with it throughout my entire career. It aids the body to enhance memory. It helps with cognitive functioning. It's an antioxidant. It has so many effects that really support this area of medicine and science. Resveratrol, same thing. I want to say this to you guys. I haven't talked about this a lot. It enhances, we think through research that it may enhance the blood flow to the brain, which is crucial. The oxygen levels, the nutrients, that optimal brain functioning is so important. Turmeric curcumin is another one. Again, anti-inflammation properties. Studies show that it actually may have antidepressant effects. We also have seen studies with OCD, with anxiety, with ADHD, ADD, and autism. There's all kinds of studies in the Middle East and in Asia that show how this particular ingredient really helps people. Raspberry extracts, again, you're improving blood flow to the brain, you're aiding in cognitive functioning, you're helping with oxidative stress. Apple cider vinegar, again, insulin sensitivity, gut microbiome, cholesterol levels. Aloe vera, again, you're hitting everything. You're hitting your immune system support. And again, I'm going to hit on this cognitive functioning. And D-ribose is really giving it the energy to work. You know, Patrick got stung by a stingray, and Clayton was saying put on skin defense and everything else. And I was like, you got to put the clean slate and restore on it. And because another thing I don't think people realize, you know, I use this on my face, and I've said this a million times. If I don't use it on my face, all the issues in my face come back, because I've struggled with things my entire life. You may say to me, how does that work on your skin? How would that work on Patrick's body, on his foot, with poison from a stingray? And then how would it work with someone with autism? Again, guys, look at it this way. You're giving the body the tools it needs to heal the areas where there's a problem. When there's inflammation, it's fire, 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 anger, 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 whether it is a stingray or whether it's with a child whose brain is not at that point working the way they want it to and it's inflamed. You got to bring in the healing qualities so that it really impacts the area of need. And restore, in my opinion, is essential. And I want to say one more thing about restore. It took me a while to take restore, just like Zero In, because it took my body, and I really believe it's because my body didn't want to heal. My body was like, maybe I don't want this because I'm used to being sick, right? If that happens and you're using this product, start with half a teaspoon, go to a teaspoon, and gradually work up, because these key ingredients are so important to the overall body in creating the greatness and having the body be what it can be. If you have, and I'm getting off topic a little bit, but Patrick, for you, for example, taking it orally is great, but if you've got something on the outside of your body and you really need to calm it down, these are really key ingredients. And I've done work in the Middle East, I've done work in Asia, where I've seen people use these key ingredients as much as we use pharmaceuticals. We're just used to using pharmaceuticals. So I think this particular product is extremely important in this area of science and medicine. Let's go to the next slide. Zero in, again, you're looking at overall really improving focus and attention. I want to say this before we get into zero in. If you have not used zero in and you're just using clean slate, like I want to say this to the whole root community. We have people that we've worked with in the community and doctors that clean slate alone has improved the health in the autism spectrum, or they've seen great results. Then we have people that it's clean slate and restore, that they needed both. And then we have people that are using clean slate, restore, and zero in. We have the most cases from that. And then another one is we add the Relive grains and some of the other products that we have, because you want to get proper nutrition and support. But everyone's been different. So I want to go back to this. This is a spectrum, right? Not everyone's the same. So people are going to need different things. If you are starting these products and you have autism or Asperger's, you're going to start clean slate first. And then you're going to do that for 2 weeks. And then you're going to go into restore. And then you're going to go into zero in. Why? Because you're going to see how the person's doing on clean slate and how they're reacting. You're going to give a 2-week window. And then you're going to go to restore. You're going to get, again, the 2-week window. And then you're going to go to the zero in. Because, and let me explain this. And I didn't educate enough on this when we first started. When you have this spectrum and you have the brain that's having to deal with these different factors, you want to try things singularly and not all together. Now, doctors and scientists that are out there that are on this call, I just want you guys to say, I know a lot of you guys start with all three, but I'm telling you, if you ask me as a scientist and a psychologist, which way I would like to support this, that's what I would prefer if you can do it. You're going to basically do segments, and then all three of them will be together. And then your Relive grains would be added later on the other things. Zero in. If you're dealing with the autism spectrum, you're going to start with 1/4 to 1/2 of a capsule. You're going to unscrew it, and you can put it in yogurt, or you can put it in something else. You do not want to start with the whole capsule. And if you ask me why, it's because the L-tyrosine, the velvet bean, the caffeine, the L-theanine, the pine bark, all of those curcumin, vitamin D, they're all going to support the brain. But when the brain's not used to that, it can aggravate it at first. So you're going to start with a small amount, and you're going to give a 2-week window to 4-week window, and maybe even 6 weeks till you go up to that whole pill, and you may never go up. And look, if you don't, you're saving money. So that's good, right? Your goal is to help the person that you're dealing with be the best they can be. And so you want to really, when I talk to you guys about autism, you can tell I'm very sensitive about it. You want to look at each individual person. You don't need to necessarily listen to every doctor, because they're all going to have a different opinion. You need to make sure you're paying attention to every detail, because remember, this spectrum are extremely sensitive people. So you want to pay attention to every detail. You don't need to move fast. You're going to take the time to care about that person and find out what works best for them. Let's go on to the next slide. So Relive grains, great results. In fact, we have some of the case studies now, they're doing clean slate and Relive grains, or clean slate and restore and Relive grains, and not doing zero in. We do have a few of the case studies where the zero in was just too hard. That's why I said you want to take, ultimately, I think that zero in needs to be added at some point, but I think it's a process down the journey, and it's not something you necessarily want to do at first. Relive grains is great, in my opinion, because when you look at autism, we know that things like MCT oil, cayenne pepper, broccoli, kale, spinach, spirulina, chlorella, all of these things are known to help people that have autism from a dietary nutritional perspective. However, I want to say this, because of the sensitivity with the GI, this is another product. When you start this, you may want to start with a lower amount and gradually work up. You also need to pay attention to the texture and how you are giving that to someone that has autism, or how they're taking it. And everyone's going to be different. There's some people with autism. In fact, this is really interesting, that can't drink orange juice. They don't like the texture. They don't like the feel. There's some people though that do take it with orange juice. There's a lot of your people that have autism. You're going to need to put this with like a nut milk, like a cashew milk. And I've talked about this before, a macadamia milk, or even with water, and like 1/4 of a banana. You just have to figure it out. But this is definitely something that you can replace sweets and carbs with things like this. You're really impacting change for the rest of someone's life. Let's go on to the next slide. Immune defense shield. I think it's really important. So there's new studies that have come out, just so everyone knows, about vitamin D and vitamin K2, which you guys know that we have. If you take these products, you have both. And also NAD and quercetin, and how people are reacting to those that have autism, Asperger's, or anything along the spectrum. We've had some great recent results with this. We've had people that say that this has really helped them with anxiety and sleep quantity. If you go back to the first couple of times, I talked about how sleep is a major issue with people with autism. So this really helps calm them down. If you guys have children, then you are going to make sure that you start again with a lower dose. But it may be helpful to take this product about an hour before someone goes to bed if there's a sleep issue. However, everybody's circadian rhythm is a little bit different because we're kind of out of whack as human beings, because we've gotten off our circadian rhythm. So teaching your children or teaching people to take this about an hour before they go to sleep and then meditating. And let me tell you one of the ways you can help children meditate. You can tell them a really good story. You can tell them something amazing and have them close their eyes and visualize it, and then have them tell you what they see. If they don't see anything and they can't comment, then you can say, well, this is what I see. And then you can tell them a story about how wonderful they are and what they're going to achieve. This is a product that I really think, because you guys know that I got approved with one of the patents for sleep deprivation and jet lag and everything else. And I haven't talked about this enough either. I do think this is a product, again, if people have problems sleeping, that you should take at nighttime. Now, a lot of people take it during the day. Like you guys know, if I get sick or if I'm traveling, I take a lot of this because it helps me. But again, if that's your focus, is really calming and creating that sleep dynamic, it can help. However, I want to say one more thing before we get off the slide. Because of the repetitive movements and the anger and the anxiety and the fidgeting and the issues at school some children have, it may be good to take one of these capsules or half this capsule before they go to school. So with breakfast, so that can help with that calming nature throughout the day. Let's go on to the next slide. Give me back my youth. This is something that really helps with gut integrity. And I think I've been talking to you guys about the microbiome. I just got the phone this morning with AARP, which is basically our top group in the United States for like elderly people or older people. And they have a program with 100,000 people that tune in. I will be speaking in that in August. And we're talking about microbiome and gut health and Alzheimer's. And we're also talking about autism and how microbiome is so important and how it impacts, which goes back again to restore and relive greens. Our goal is to really help the whole GI, the whole body through the gut and through the microbiome of the body. Give Me Back My Youth is one of those things that can really modulate a human response and an immune response to support the overall system. It also helps with gut integrity. This may be one of the pieces you have not used that will help an individual with autism. There are some people, and I'm going to say this, and you guys know that I worked on the peptides and the collagen and how we do this. There are going to be some people that cannot take this product. So you're going to start with a low dose and see how they handle it. And I'm just going to say this again. You're not going to overload that person with everything if you have an option. I'm not telling a doctor how to treat a patient. They can make their own decision. But if you're a parent, you're going to do this gradually and see what works and what doesn't work. Let's go on to the next slide. I know I'm past the time, Patrick. So Sculpt, I added Sculpt and Crush because I understood when I was talking to Tiger, I really wanted to make sure we went over everything, because your Sculpt and Crush, in my opinion, as an impact to the microbiome, because of the ingredients that are in it that impact brain health, like the Ginenium sylvestre, which in Switzerland is considered a pharmaceutical, it really does improve metabolic function and oxidative stress. You have to be careful about giving this to kids. I just want to say this. I'd like this discussion to be about adults when it comes to these last two products. From the time you're born, your metabolism starts changing. The peptides, aminos, when it comes to crush, your body is impacted by that. So giving your body really what it needs to preserve cognitive functioning and to really improve the cognitive function and memory are important. And valerian root does that. The GABA does that, which comes in valerian root. The white kidney beans, the ginger root, all of that is really helping the body with the different levels of glucose and insulin and sugar and carbs. And I've said this a million times. If you really want to impact your body, this is something that can really do it. Patrick was on a text, I think I sent today or yesterday, I can't get my days straight, with one of the aunts and mothers from University of Colorado that is getting ready to do a podcast with me. And she said she has seen such huge changes from Sculpt and from Root. I don't want to forget to follow up. I put you on that, Patrick, because I can't forget to do that. That's really important to us and to the community. She wants to show everyone how great she looks, and the coaches want to talk about how they've improved. And I ended up going back and forth with her today. And these were the two of the products that really she felt like impacted her. This is off the subject a little bit of autism, but I do want to say if you're an adult and you have Asperger's or autism, I think Sculpt and Crush are really important, not just because of the cognitive functioning, but because when you have your insulin levels that are off, or the sugar levels that are off, or your metabolism isn't working, and the brain doesn't function as well. The neurotransmitters don't transmit as well. So again, this product was not just for people to look better, it was for people to be greater and to support their body to be the best it can be. Let's go to the next slide. Crush. So Crush is really important, I believe, because of the peptides and the aminos. They really facilitate the cleansing process of the body and supporting the brain cells as well as supporting cellular health all the way through the body. When it comes to basically glutathione, if you look at all of these, you're really helping the body as a precursor to glutathione and producing it. So you can protect the neurons, so you can support the brain, so that you have the antioxidants. So I really think this particular product is extremely important. And if you ask me, can children take it? My answer is it would depend. You need to see the age of the child. And again, I would start with the beginning products and then move to this. If you're an adult that is on the spectrum, this is something that I feel like could really benefit you from a peptide amino perspective, because you really need the building blocks for your neurotransmitters. And if you decide that you're using this for a child, because that's your decision, again, you're going to start with a lower dose and you're going to see the reaction. Again, you're really going to try this. These are all natural. We can't make claims about natural things because of the laws and the rules, but what we can do is give the body the tools it needs to support to make us as good and great as we can be. And my hope today is that you guys have learned something that can help your children, that can help people around you. I believe that all of us are on a spectrum somewhere. I believe that all of us have someone in our life that has Asperger's or autism. And I believe it is our job to be understanding and kind and loving and to help people have the best life possible. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. We have not been doing giveaways on the Root U. So what I will do for next week is we will do some giveaways. We're still waiting on the peptides. I want to make sure that we are offering you guys really what you need. Please send to Patrick and please send to me any suggestions. I loved hearing from Verena about how she wanted to hear about this because it matters to me. I want to be able to impact. I want to be able to impact you guys as much as I can. I do think Nurse Christy has a question really quick. I'm sorry that we're behind in this call.
I do, Dr. Christina. It's actually about the Sculpt. So when you talked about the Sculpt, I have a couple of ladies that I'm working with that are pregnant.
Yeah.
They're both our glucose, and it was reported to be positive, and their doctors are concerned about the babies gaining too much weight. How would you feel about those ladies with that particular circumstance trying the Sculpt, even if it was like one capsule as opposed to two?
So there's some studies that show that the form of ginseng that's used in this at a high dose could not be beneficial. There's also, if you look at the valerian root, if you use that at a high dose, it can be an hallucinogen. I'm just bringing that up because with your hormones, my answer to that is you'd have to consult. I can't tell anyone, even if I was a pharmaceutical product, for example, when I worked at the pharmaceutical companies, all of our pharmaceutical products were categorized as a class C or D or whatever. It was the classification because of the risk to the mother and the child and because they don't know. But I want to go back to this. The ingredients that I use are all natural ingredients. There's seeds, there's roots, there's plants that are used. So I think that's one of the misunderstandings. Is extremely frustrating to me because if you ask, let me use an example, Nurse Christy, if you ask, can a mother take, can eat oysters? My answer is definitely not, right? You can't eat oysters because the oyster could have bacteria. You don't really, the products that we have are natural and I don't use high dosing. I really am using nano emulsions or micro emulsions, and I'm doing a pulling out process that's patented or patent pending, you know, that no one's really done. I think that's why there's such a misunderstanding about the products that we have and others. If it were me, let me give you another example. I was so sick during all 4 of my pregnancies that I ended up in and out of the hospital. The most weight I ever gained was 17 pounds in any pregnancy. I gained 13 and 14 pounds in 2 of the pregnancies. I couldn't keep any food down on any day. And I was in and out, like I said, on IVs and, you know, really sick. I took 2 class C pharmaceutical products to help with the nauseousness because I didn't have an option. Otherwise, I couldn't carry the pregnancy. So you really have to look at weighing the benefit of the mother and the child. But again, I think the benefit of our products is you're not using higher dosing. You can use a smaller dose where there haven't been risk. We can ask ISNS. Tiger, are you on here? Is Tiger on here?
Yes,
Patrick? Okay.
I'm on here.
We can look at those ingredients and what can be used during pregnancy. We can't go against a doctor. We have to say what I'm getting ready to say, and that is we are not allowed to give advice to pregnant mothers, but we can do a slide deck on that, Nurse Christy at ISNS on those particular ingredients and look into it. Because I think that's something that you're not the first person, by the way, that's asked me that. I've had a lot of people. I actually had a discussion this weekend with the functional med doctor that asked me, and she has a bunch of patients that are overweight. And you know this, here's the problem. You develop preeclampsia and different things like that, which I had, by the way, during pregnancy, even though I hardly gained any weight. And that's toxic to the mother and the child.
Right.
So we will look into that and do a slide deck on that with information at ISNS. I want to tell everyone I don't know if Patrick knows this, but we're doing a free membership into ISNS for 3 months. I just released that on my Instagram with a code so people have it. If you guys need that from Patrick, he can send it. And the reason I'm saying that is we're trying to get as many organizations and universities and doctors and clinics involved in ISNS because that's a separate society. They do their own case studies. They do their own journals. And this weekend, because of this, you probably heard me on Monday's call, Patrick, it was with Jimmy Thompson. You know, we're moving towards this line of products for doctors only. We are trying to get as many individuals in that so we can educate on science, so that we can educate on nutrition and everything that we're doing. So please pass that information on. We will make sure that Patrick puts that in the newsletter, that we have partnered with ISNS and they're giving away a free membership, because that way you guys have access to information that I can't discuss necessarily on Root U.
Thank you, Dr.
But we will work on that for you, Christy.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, you guys. I hope you all have an amazing rest of the week. And I apologize again that I was late.